So it's summertime. You know what it means, right? Homilies under 3 minutes. That's what it means. Let me begin with my personal story of John. My father's name was John. He passed away last year. Today would be his name day, the biggest thing in Poland that you celebrate a name. So, funny story. When I was born, my dad was 3 months short of being 24. My mom was 19 and a half. Unexpected happened, so, they rushed, had to get married, and I was born 6 months after their wedding. And in Poland, you don't name a child in a hospital. You have to go to the city hall. So as your wife is in the hospital, husband goes to the city hall, names the child, and it gets registered in the books. My dad went to the city hall with the name Karol. Okay? Karol, John Paul II, they wanted to honor the Pope. Also, my dad's best friend's name was Karol. So I don't know if my dad got nervous. He was at loss, he didn't know what to do, but he came back with Tomasz. So that's how I got my name. Nobody knows why I am Tomasz, but I was supposed to be Karol. Today we have a similar story in the Gospel, story of Zacharias, who wanted to name his son after his name. Obviously, he was carrying something in himself. He was proud of himself, who he was, and wanted to pass that legacy on his son. Well, God had a different plan. God wanted to name his son John and silence Zacharias because he was not willing to follow God's plan. Zacharias was mute for 9 months. My dad was mute for most of his life. There was barely anything coming up out of his mouth. Very quiet. His father, my grandfather, was very quiet as well. My great-grandfather was even more quiet. Apparently there's a story, a family story, where my great-grandfather was in the Polish underground during the World War II, and when they were interrogating him in front of his children, he didn't say a beep. That's how he got his nickname, the Quiet One. We had no idea about that nickname, or pseudonym, but that's what we used to call my father, the Quiet One. And then we found some newspapers, read about it, and it all made sense. He was quiet. Imagine my father having a son at age of 24. Maybe he had some plans for himself first. He didn't finish the college yet. My mom barely graduated from high school. Maybe my dad had some aspirations for himself, some plans. He wanted to get a job. He wanted to build a house, maybe later start a family, and all of a sudden I show up, Karol Tomasz. And now what? Now he has plans and aspirations for me. And I am being known for being a rebel. None of his plans came to fruition when it comes to my life. I went to the seminary, which he hated from the beginning. He wanted me to be either a teacher or an engineer. I moved out to the States when I was 22, which we never talk about. And all of the other things I was doing. He was barely accepting, and most of the time, very, very quiet and silent about my choices. In our lives, we can be either Zacharias, we can go against God's will, and then eventually give up at the end and say, all right, God, this is your plan. His name is John. And then we can live our lives. Or we can be like John, who never took a credit for who he was for Jesus. We can be like John, whose plan was given by God. His job was to announce Jesus. His job was to prepare people for Jesus. His job was to preach and teach, but never take a credit for it. And John was many, many times confused for Jesus. Maybe he was even a better preacher. Maybe he was even more compassionate than Jesus, more touching, more loving, more accepting, but never got a single credit for it. And we only celebrate him once a year today. Jesus is always celebrated every Sunday. John is not. So it's all about, since I have to wrap up on the 3 minutes, it's all about God's plan for you. Where are you with your plan with God? If you're sitting here thinking my plan is done, you are wrong. And I'm here to tell you that. Because I'm standing here, if I think my plan is done, I'm wrong. Your plan with God is not done. If you're feeling comfortable sitting in those pews, your plan is not done. God has something for you. And you might be mute right now. You might be silenced because of your own inner stubbornness, because of your own choices to tell God what your plan is. I raised my kids, or I'm going to have kids. I have a job, I had a job, I'm retired, I'm reading books, I'm enjoying my life. That's it, God, I'm done. No, you're not. If you're still kicking, still walking in, even with a cane, God still has a plan for you. And it's up to you to agree to that plan. And it's up to you to love others even though you don't feel loved. To accept others even though you're not accepted. To bring compassion, love, care, even if you don't receive it yourself. You might be angry with God. You might be angry with the rest of the world. But in your anger, in your disappointments, in your losses, God has a plan for you to take the attention away from you. Stop being number one in your head. Become number two for a change. Don't be afraid to say, it's not about me, it's about Him. Be like John, and do not be like Zacharias. Amen? Amen.